Hi everyone, welcome back to Java 1 for All. And in this video we are going to talk about how constructors they behave when we have inheritance. So as you can see, we are not adding any constructors to the employee or the manager. But remember, even though you don't add constructors, Java will take care of that for you, and you have a constructor without any argument. So if you don't see the rest of the packages here, just right click and then reload from disk. So if you go to domain class and you go to manager, you do have manager, and employee, you have employee. So basically that is a little rule, because when you are changing something in the superclass, this means that all subclasses they need to follow the same rule. For example, let's say here that the employee now, we would like to make sure that the name is mandatory. This means that you are going to add a constructor employee where you ask for the name. So you're saying if I want an employee, I need to add the name. The problem is the manager is also an employee. And if the manager is an employee, it should follow the same rules, is A. So by adding employee with a string name here, I do not have this constructor anymore. Java will not add this. So I still have it here because I didn't compile again, but Java will not add that. And as you can see here, my manager now is having a compilation error saying there is no default constructor and employee. Basically now I have to follow that rule. I have to say, okay, manager will also have a name because manager is an employee. So I will add here public manager, and I have to ask the name. And here, how do I call the constructor from the employee? So remember, if you had another constructor, let's add another constructor here. I'll insert constructor with, let's say, name and social security number. How do you call this name here? So remember, we had that option where we use this and we send the name there. And by the time we are executing this, the responsibility will come here. So we know how that works already. And this has a small rule where it needs to be the first statement, the first valid statement, because you can add also comments here before, but it should be the first valid statement. If you add this one before, you do have a compilation error. So just a quick recap. Now, if I am in my manager, how do I access something from the superclass? And we saw here, the rule is pretty simple. Super, and then you just have to pass the arguments that will match the constructor in the employee class. In my case here, I just want the name. So I will send the name and I will add a semicolon. So the rules here are exactly the same as the this. The super needs to be the first valid statement. You cannot have anything else, or system out println, or even you cannot have, if you had another constructor, this, because both of them they have the same rule. It must be the first constructor, the first valid statement inside a constructor. And you cannot call, for example, the same rule, you cannot call the constructor super from your method. Okay, so now that we are saying that both managers and employee, they have this rule, remember, the employee is like, if you think about inheritance, it's like kind of like template. In the end, the manager will have this dot name is equals name here inside the manager's object, and of course we will have the manager's object with the name that we are sending in the constructor here. So let's go back to inheritance test and make some changes. Now I will copy this. Actually, I will cut and paste, remove the set name, and then same thing here. Control X, Control V, Control X here. And I will execute this. Shift F10. You will see that it works exactly the same way as it was working before. So the rule is, if you have a class being subclassed, a superclass, and you add a constructor, you have to make sure that if all the subclasses, they have a way to call this constructor. In this case, we are breaking the code, and that's why I said that we are like highly coupling the code, because one small change here and broke all the subclasses, because I have to make sure that the manager has a constructor that's going to match. So technically, I don't need to have a constructor like this with name. I could send just a plain string. But of course, it's giving a problem because of this one. But if I remove this one, the code will work. So the thing is, the rule is I need to call super that will match the constructor. So we know, why do we need to do that? Because when we had the constructors before, we didn't call super, and I didn't see super being called here. That's because I can give you one example. All the classes in Java, remember, you cannot extend multiple classes. You cannot have multiple inheritance, but that doesn't mean that you cannot have going up. You cannot go up. That means, for example, in simple terms, you cannot have like multiple fathers. So if you have employee that's father of manager, you cannot have another one. But you can have grandfather, grandfather, and so on. And that is working right now through the object class. The manager is an employee. The employee is an object. Even though you don't see it, all the classes in Java will somehow extend object. And how do you know that? Because if I remove this, and IntelliJ is giving us a warning saying that it's explicitly extending object, you should not do that because it's done automatically. So if you come back to the inheritance test and you get any reference variable and you call it, you will see that there are some methods that does not belong, you didn't create. So equals, hash code, toString, get class, notify all these methods and these variables, they are part of the object class, because all classes, they are object. So this means I don't have multiple inheritance, like I cannot have multiple fathers, but address is an object. Employee is an object. Manager is an employee. And because employee is an object, it means that manager is also an object. And if I come here to inheritance and I call manager dot, you can see the same type of methods, equals hash code, toString, get class, and so on. And here we don't see it, but if I am extending object, the rules, they apply. So the object also has a constructor, and this constructor has no argument. And the employee, the employee, it has a call implicitly to super. So even though you didn't write, this will be called automatically. But if object had another object, we would need, we had another constructor asking any kind of argument. All the classes you ever create in Java, they would need to do the same as we did at manager. We would need to pass right here whatever we are asking in the object class. So in this case, what's happening is the employee will call super, basically the super from the constructor from the object class, and then it will continue the flow. So since this is kind of implicitly, we don't have to write it down. So that's why it was working before. Remember that we had the default constructors? So the default constructor was calling super from manager to employee, exactly like we had here. And that's why our code was working. But since we changed, and now we are asking for saying the only way to create an employee object is to send by sending a name. So if you have this rule, all the classes that are extending employee, all the employees, in this case manager is an employee, we have to also send the name. So basically that's the rule that you have to be careful when you are working with inheritance. Whatever you do at your superclass, the subclasses will be impacted. So I hope you enjoyed. See you in the next video. Bye.